I officially got told off by the dean just now. With the comment that my student was there earlier than me. Well done, Lilith.
Outrageous.
I know, Monday mornings is tough to get it all done, but we made it. There's all of us, so that's great. Thanks for joining us to Neuroccino on this Monday morning. You're all old school here, so you know the drill, but basically Neuroccino is a weekly journal club and everyone is welcome to come and present a piece of science they got excited about. And it's a self-volunteering basis, so whoever wants to do it, just let me know. Otherwise, you're going to get voluntold. Today we had a volunteer, which is Lilith. She is a PhD student with me in Nijmegen. And Lilith, if you're ready, please share the link to the paper so I can also put it on YouTube and then present. Thank you very much. Present your paper in full screen, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. My share screen. Can you see it? Cool. So I start then. I want to show you today this paper that was published in Current Neurology and Neuroscience report last year. And there are several things that captured my attention here. First of all, it's a nice and intriguing title. And that kind of promises me that this is going to be a paper that tries to change a frame of thinking about agnosia and neglect. Second, it is the fact that in the paper they discuss historical works, the main historical works on agnosia. For example, the pioneer work on agnosia of Lissauer, which I've heard of before or read a couple of sentences mentioned in other papers, but honestly, I've never properly read his work and analyzed it. And I was surprised here that it's a paper 2021, and they actually quite go deep kind of into his work. So I was curious to read about it. And then finally, it's I wanted to read something in general, a theoretical review that was not just only tells us about what is known about neglect or agnosia, but also it tries to use new and old evidence to support their new theory on the core deficit that might lead to these two non-uniform neuropsychological disorders such as agnosia and neglect. So one of the shock information for me was that Lissauer, he had a patient L, and I thought that this patient has associative agnosia, and that's why Lissauer divided into two types of agnosia, apperceptive and associative. But actually, it happened so that this famous patient was also exhibiting symptoms of apperceptive agnosia as well. And when in the textbooks in general, we are told that this patient has associative agnosia only, it kind of, let's say, just simplifies the whole picture, clinical picture, and then people go to clinics doing their practice and they see that it's just a mess inside the clinic and the same person exhibited symptoms of both disorders. So that was kind of interesting to know. And even Lissauer, he was never saying that these two apperceptive and associative agnosias are opposing or dichotomous disorders. He never believed in the strict border between these two, and it's kind of rather a spectrum than two separate disorders. The only thing that was kind of confusing for me in this paper is the relation between in one terminology, in one classification with another classification, because in the beginning we had this apperceptive and associative agnosia proposed by Lissauer, and then later on we get this form and integrative agnosia. And I didn't quite understand the relationship between them two, and it would have been interesting for me to understand why people why we introduced another classification, what was wrong with the previous one, and are they the same thing? Can we use them as synonyms? And authors kind of jump from one terminology to another one, saying that they are, so I don't know if I find that place. So for example, here they say that Lissauer fractioned apperceptive visual agnosia into different domains, and they say that Lissauer's distinction between simple and complex objects anticipates a modern distinction between patient with form and integrative visual agnosia. So in this way, I say, okay, then apperceptive agnosia can be divided more or less in form and integrative. But then later on, they explain they say that they said that the patient HGA has associative agnosia, and then the second sentence that is the most heavily studied patient with integrative agnosia. So in one place they are saying that it is kind of fractioned in two, but in another place they use it as a synonym. So I don't know, maybe I didn't understand it quite well, but it was a bit confusing, that part. They describe different patients. They describe different tests, how we can test people with agnosia, which kind of errors they can show us. And this is quite nice review about those disorders. Yes, and then they come to the main point that was also interesting for me, is that they start to define what is selective attention. And their main point for me that captured my attention is that usually researchers, they do research on, for example, feature attention or object attention or just scene attention, and they study attention on one level, kind of, which is important, but this research kind of becomes fragmented, and we neglect the really important aspect of selective attention, is the fact that how our attention actually switches from one scale to another scale. Like they give us an example, for example, with a laptop. You have a laptop, and this laptop can be separated from the background, but then if we like zoom in, we see screen, we see keyboard, we see mouse, and then we can zoom in more to the different scale, and there are different keys, and so on. So this idea of changing the scales from bigger to smaller is ignored when you study just one level of attention. So it's kind of vertical, I don't know, vertical domain or the dimension of the selective attention. And as I understand, they said that this is the core deficit that can lead to these two types of neuropsychological disorders. So, and that's something that is common both in neglect and agnosia. Another cool thing about this paper is that it not only kind of push forward theoretically or their ideas on, let's say, just on the level of cognitive psychology or clinical neuropsychology, but also they show neurological substrates that support those functions, this attention to scale function. And they describe both gray matter areas and white matter tracts that are important for this function. And it's a lot here, but I think if you're interested, it would be nice to check which connection goes where and what is common in both disorders. The only thing that also I was expecting that they will also talk about, I mean, this is a big paper, a lot of information, a lot of evidence from different research, but I was expecting them to talk also about splenium because it can, disconnection of the splenial connection can lead also to some visual perception deficit, and they just talk, as I understand, only about intra-hemispheric connections and not inter-hemispheric. So it's that. And also they talk about, for example, optic aphasia. They mentioned about it according to one paper. And for me, optic aphasia, as far as I understood, is from other papers, is when you have preserved semantics and you have preserved percept, but the connection between two is disrupted. So person cannot name an object because there is no connection between semantic idea and a specific percept. And here it is opticophagia. But if I go back to Lissauer's work, and they also cite him, it feels like his associative agnosia is actually opticophagia. So this terminology is just, they are jumping from one to another, and this makes me confused a bit. And also, if they talk about opticophagia, they don't explain how do they, what does they mean by that term, and what is the connection with the previous terminology. Yeah. Yeah, in general, I would say that this is a nice paper that overviews the broad a lot of topics that connect agnosia, neglect, attention, both on level of neurological substrates and also on theoretical level, and proposes another framework kind of to think about what is the main core that can lead to different symptoms. And also it points out that we should not think about disorders as fragmented, non-related to each other disorders. Yes. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know, there are so many things they are describing, but that was something that caught my attention, and I wanted just to share it with you. Yeah, something like this.
Thank you, Lilith. Very interesting. The first hands are already up, so I'm going to give the floor directly to Chris.
Hi, thank you for the presentation of the paper. Just one thing, I never worked with patients at all, actually, and I'm not a psychologist or anything, so I don't know much about agnosia and the different types of agnosia, and what's the difference with visual neglect. So if you can you describe it a little bit just to understand a little bit better the whole paper?
Yes, so for example, if we take the classification of Lissauer, he has two types. He described two types of agnosia, apperceptive and associative. So apperceptive is like when you have you cannot connect different parts of the object in the whole percept. So it's the problem of perception. For example, if we look at this part. One second. Now, for example, if we look at this patient, right? We ask this patient to copy an object, right? And we are not saying what is that. So the only information that this patient has is just a visual information. And we ask that person to copy that. And this is what he does. So this kind of, as a detectives, we kind of say, okay, then it means that he doesn't see he doesn't see the whole picture here. But maybe we thought, okay, maybe this person has some problem semantics and he didn't know what is an apple, right? Or he has motor problems, I don't know. But if we ask this patient to draw an apple, he knows what is apple and he draws pretty okay. So it means that he doesn't have motor problems because he can draw a circle and everything. And he knows what is an apple because it looks like apple. So this person doesn't have a problem with semantics. He doesn't have a problem with motor, something connected with motor function, but it has a problem of percept. But at the same time, it's not that this person have problems with visual acuity or something like this. His vision can be 100% perfect, but it's about the integration of different parts or features of an object. So this is a perceptive agnosia. Associative agnosia, according to Lissauer, as far as I understood, is when I don't know if there is is when you have you know what is an apple, right? You show a person an apple, and this person cannot name this object. But for example, if you give this person an apple to his hand, right, he can recognize that this is an apple. So it's a problem of recognition via visual stream, let's say. Because even, for example, if you have a bottle of water and you ask a patient with associative agnosia, close his eyes, and you do this with a bottle of water, he will name that this is a bottle of water. So it's the problem of the visual stream recognition of an object via visual stream. So this is associative agnosia according to Lissauer. But then there comes this other type, other categorization. For example, integrative agnosia was proposed by Redock and Humphreys with these patients, HGA, this one. So here we can see that, which, as I understand, can be named as a can be named as associative agnosia as well, because we see that the percept is intact. We ask, he's pretty cool in copying a bee, like here. So it means that he sees what he sees, but he might have a problem to connect the visual percept with the semantics, because I mean, he could draw a lemon perfectly on the right side, but on the left side, looks like arancini or something. So that's the thing. But then there is different other types like simultanagnosia, and they have a ventral and dorsal simultanagnosia, and very not well described opticophagia, which I get confused again. And it feels like opticophagia is associative agnosia. There is, I don't know, it's kind of messy. I feel like it's better just, I checked to read Lissauer's work. It's there is a translation.
Okay, but that's clear why there is actually a debate, because there are different types and different interpretation of the symptoms.
Yeah, and I don't understand why other terminology was created, what was wrong with previous one. And also the word apperception, it's also confusing because it was introduced by Wundt. No, it was introduced long time ago by other philosophers. But then there is Wundt, he changed a bit the idea of apperception. And then there is apperceptive agnosia by Lissauer. So this jumps from one person interpretation to another, brings this confusion. And then, of course, when you go to clinic, it's even more confusing because once the same patient get both symptoms. Yeah. I hope it was a bit clear of
No, I understand. I definitely understand the confusion now.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thanks. It's a bit of a shame, given that it's a review paper, that it's confusing to separate it. Usually,
it would.
When you read it, and you're like, that makes sense.
No, it would have been nice if there was like some glossary or something, and at least they write all the terms that they use and how do they understand them, because I think it's important in those kind of situations. I mean, they actually do like a huge parts of saying what is integrative, visual form agnosia. They describe a patient, but they don't exactly give the definitions, or even if they give definitions, they don't connect one term with another. At least for me, it wasn't so much clear in these cases. Yeah.
I guess another difficulty that comes with the territory is that in the clinic, we often test for neglect. That's quite a standard procedure, but agnosia is a lot less tested in the clinic.
They told about different methods that they test, like the copying figures, or as they say, bread and butter of psychophysics, when you have two forced alternative choice tests, when you have to say if these two percepts are the same or not. So in this way, we kind of can catch the person who has a perceptive agnosia because he cannot understand what he sees. And in that way, you can also show this test and at the same time see which kind of brain areas activate, and if there is a difference between two pictures that are structurally different. So if there is no difference, then it means that the person, I don't know what it means, but probably it means that something's wrong, because in contrast with controls, there is a difference between seeing two different percepts pictures.
The figure that you're just showing is quite interesting in terms of the nomenclature and the supposed anatomy. I guess we sit down later and discuss that in more detail, because there is another question from Valentina who can't unmute today, and the question was, other than neglect, do they have other co-concurrent symptoms, for example, apraxia?
Who exactly? Neglect patients or?
I guess agnostic patients.
Apraxia, let me think. Yeah, I think, because apraxia in which sense? Like they cannot reach the object? Yeah, I mean, if you don't see the percept correctly, you might not take the object in a correct way. So, for example, you are giving a person, I don't know, scissors, and if you know that there is a sharp place on one side, you probably have to take it with a place where it's not sharp. But if the percept is not integrated, is not also, you can just take it, and then after you touch the scissors, you can get information about that you are holding a scissor through, for example, haptic stream.
So yes, now I can use myself. Hey, hi.
Hello.
Yes, exactly. And but apperceptive is also representative. So if they see the object and they have to mime it, that how they would use the object, they wouldn't know how to do it. Maybe they can retrieve the information of what the object is, but they cannot access to the motor planning information related to that specific object. So I was wondering whether it can be associated with agnosic patients.
But maybe when the person already is holding something, he can he already knows how to use it. Is that possible? I think yes.
No, in apraxic patients, usually no. They wouldn't know how to use the object, not even touching it.
No,
so
then yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm kind of not trusting all these things, because it feels like even though you are saying that this person has agnosia of one type, it means, but they don't speak about other symptoms. So this person might have also, because also, for example, I saw some patients in clinics during my internship. There was a patient with Huntington disease, and I thought that Huntington disease is a motor disease, right? So the main problem is motor functioning and cognitive decline. But when you test these patients with all tests, we saw that actually this person has also problem with visual perception. And then when you start to Googling if patient with Huntington disease has visual problems, like with visual perception, not like visual acuity or something, you see that there is growing evidence that we were missing again a symptom that is not the main, but also important. And people with Huntington disease, they also have visual perception problems. And now they think that it might be the neurodegeneration in occipital cortex can happen, maybe one of the first symptoms of progression of Huntington disease. So this thing that we take the most evident symptom, we forget that actually we neglect other symptoms, and this can be misleading for the research in general, I think. Yeah.
Which comes back to the point I made earlier, that some of the symptoms are just so present that they're routinely assessed in the clinic, while others are a bit more subtle and they're not routinely assessed, and or we don't even have the right tools to really tease them apart, especially in acute settings.
Yeah, also, for example, even for neglect, right? There are two types, like egocentric and allocentric, but usually how it's tested, not usually the way I saw that it is tested, is just in general, if the person has neglect, ignores the part of visual field or not. But the treatment, the research done on neglect now, as far as I understood, there is a specific, for example, object-centered neglect can get more people with this type of disorder. They can have more benefit with a specific type of rehabilitation protocol, not the other ones. So it means that we have to test also in clinics which type of neglect exactly has this person. But I think it's going there. But yeah, the thing that in clinics you have to act fast, and you just try to categorize patients as simple as possible. But I'm not sure
necessarily as simple as possible, but based on the most urgent.
Yes, the most urgent, but might be those not evident symptoms actually maybe can help us understand the general mechanism, not just the thing that, for example, if you are sick and the worst thing that you have is fever, but it might happen that the problem is not the fever exactly, but some internal processes, like, I don't know, some inflammation of your lungs. So that's the main reason why you have the fever, and you don't need to think about fever so much. You have to think first about the inflammation of lungs. I don't know.
I was finding the cause rather than treating.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Lovely discussion. This is all the time we have this week. Thank you very much for presenting the paper. Next week, we actually have 2 volunteers, so we'll see who ends up doing it. Thanks for throwing your name in the hat. And until then, have an exciting week in science. See you next Monday.